Hello, Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the news show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones, and with me whenever possible is
D. Scott Miller.
Scott Miller. And we got some phone calls, but that's okay. That answering the phone, we have the honor of hosting Doug Engmann, the former president of the San Francisco Planning Commission, and a man who's been involved with local politics for 50 years. And also joining us is Jeremy Mack from the amazing Phoenix Project, a wonderful organization that we should all support because they're doing the hard work. They're connecting the money to the politics, and they're truly the ones showing how this kind of right-wing takeover going on in San Francisco, who's funding it, how they're funding it, and some of the possibilities or why they're funding it. Now, today we're going to talk about Prop D because Prop D is truly, I would say, pretty insidious. I think that's the best way to put it. It's an insidious proposition up for a vote next Tuesday that basically puts a lot of limits on commissions. It defangs the police commission, the one thing that's actually effective in keeping police in check in San Francisco, and so many other things that are wrong with it. And it's all being funded. It's all being pushed by right-wingers like Michael Moritz. But first off, let's just get into it, guys. Why do they hate political commissions?
I think it's well, first thing, very few of them have ever been on a commission, and I don't know how many actually have attended a commission meeting, because it's clear from what they've done that they don't really understand the role of commissions in San Francisco. And commissions are easy to blame for supposedly all of the quote unquote ills that San Francisco is suffering now. Though when you ask them a question, why are you eliminating the library commission to cure the fentanyl crisis? There's no answer to that. And so I think part of it's ignorance, but part of it is really they don't like citizen involvement in the government. Now, why they don't like citizen involvement in the government, I don't know. It's similar to the right-wing view on the national level that where Trump wants to eliminate all the independent agencies, because the independent agencies are a check on what he can do, and so get rid of them, and then he can do what he wants to do without having to worry with them. I think it's the same gut instinct that those people believe that commissions are a barrier to a mayor that they want to elect to do what they want to do. And to me, that's the core issue. Why all of the support people in Together SF are for it is, I think it's primarily ignorance, and then following the lead, the lead of the leader.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jeremy, so you through the Phoenix Project have really tracked down that a lot of the funding for Prop D is coming from Michael Moritz. Now, if people don't know who Michael Moritz is, he's a billionaire. He's actually a journalist turned tech investor and made a bunch of money. And I believe now he's getting into real estate, which is kind of why this is happening. But what is Moritz's motivations for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go a step beyond what Doug mentioned in terms of the ignorance maybe of Together SF to reroute actually back towards what we mentioned a little bit earlier, the that 6-year plan that they released in that 49-page presentation, where they really laid out a comprehensive overview of how to consolidate power in the executive branch, whereby they are then able to have more direct control over over the controls of power. And so, Together SF wants to be in the driver's seat, and Michael Moritz is part of that. And they're moving beyond lobbying, and saying, okay, I'll put a bunch of money behind a candidate and get them elected, to actually creating the candidates themselves, creating the candidates, creating the platform, saying this is what you're going to be running on. And this is, and if you follow our lead, then we're going to fund you. And we have all this infrastructure with organizing and media, through the Standard and other press connections to really make these things possible. Yeah. So it's really, I've been calling them like political pressure juggernauts. Really, they've moved into a new realm of power and direct control over Sanford, the election cycle, and trying to get their folks elected. People like Grow SF, Together SF, Neighbors for Better San Francisco, and the relationship they play with each other. That being said, I think that Joe Eskenazi did a great job in his piece that came out yesterday, Mission Local, that on Michael Moritz. It's kind of a long expose, just sort of talking about his opinion, over multiple interviews with Moritz, to get a sense of what is really in it for him, what he's looking for. And he definitely, I think, although Eskenazi does a good job at kind of trying to throw complications and nuances into he does this, and he also, he supports Chesa, but he also supports Together SF that was against Chesa. How do we, circle that square? But one thing that I found really insightful that he has a couple of quotes in that article is the way in which Moritz consistently, and this is from his tech background, is really believes that the best way to fix San Francisco, the best way to make San Francisco into an effective city, is to give a lot more power to the executive branch, to give a lot more power to the top. And we know from this election, one of the most expensive mayor's races in city history, if not the most expensive mayor's race in city history, just over $30 million has been poured into it to date. That big money goes that much farther in electing the mayor than it does in any other elected position in the city. And especially citywide elections are a lot more prone to control by big money interests, and especially the downtown interests, than district-based elections, which is also part of their 6-year plan, is to get rid of district-based elections and replace them with citywide elections. So, it's all kind of part and parcel of this larger strategy of consolidation and consolidation at the top. And I think that's a very important part of the narrative here that often has been missing, I think, in the way media has been discussing Prop D specifically.
It's very similar to what the Koch brothers started to do with the Republican Party, after Reagan in the 90s, which is lay the groundwork in many, many different ways to take control and take power over the government. And in a very mini sort of way, this is what's people are trying to do here. The reality is, and maybe I can give a little historical perspective, there was always money thrown at issues, again, in the last 50 years. When we first enacted district elections in the mid-70s, it was opposed again by the downtown interests, the chamber, and the mayor at that time, Joe Alioto. And the fights we had over downtown office development, the height limits, the restrictions, there was always a lot of money around, but it was never, how do I want to say, it was never consolidated the way Moritz has consolidated it. You didn't have one entity contributing, 70-80% of the money, and nor were the monies that big. I mean, basically, it's like he has a toy that he can use, and he's playing with his toy, which is the city of San Francisco. You know, back in when we passed Prop M in 1986, I mean, you had a lot of different interests opposing it, but nobody was putting up $10 million to do that. I mean, we were outspent, 50 to 1, not 2,000 to 1. And that's the big difference. The tech billionaires have got play money, and whereas the businesses of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they had businesses to run, so they couldn't bankrupt their businesses to coalesce and defeat what progressives were trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it's true. There is, and it's so much of it too is kind of shaping the city to what they want it to be. Like I just read that Johnny Ive profile in the New York Times, who's basically trying to make his own little city in the marina where he's like designing it and stuff. And it's like this is gross, like this is a real city. This is not like your toy. This is not your train set, Oh man. But yeah, so and I'm going to mention too, I will put the profile of Moritz in the comments of the story, as well as the link to the presentation Jeremy was talking about, a presentation for Together SF, which is basically used to raise money that they were sent anonymously, which is such a great story, and so glad somebody had the guts to stand up and do the right thing. But I do want to talk about the cutting of commissions. You mentioned in your op-ed, Doug, that it almost seems like the number of commissions they want to cut is arbitrary. And by the way, that will be linked too, because that is a great piece. But is it really arbitrary, or is there definitely some like commissions they really want to get out, and like the number of commissions is the big deal because it's cutting it down to 65, right?
Well, the number is arbitrary. They try and justify it by looking at other cities in the state, but there's no city and county combined that's in the state. In fact, if you look at LA, which they say has fewer commissions than San Francisco, combined, there's 200 commissions in LA City and LA County. And quite honestly, if you include all the cities in LA County, there are hundreds of commissions. The closest comparison is Denver, which is a city and county of about the same population. And surprise, surprise, they have the same number of commissions that we do today. So, yes, it is arbitrary, though it's funny, the commissions that they're getting rid of, some people really think these are the commissions that the wealthy don't want to have around, like the Arts Commission. I mean, the Arts Commission supports, dozens of different arts organizations in the city. And yes, they can support the ballet, the opera, the symphony, but that's not what their focus is. So the Arts Commission is out. The Library Commission. Who uses the library? Okay, if you're a billionaire, you don't use the library. But if you're a family in the Mission District and you want to go get some books, you can go to the library. So it just seems that you get rid of the Arts Commission, but you leave the War Memorial Board intact, which is where most of the wealthy donors who have mayoral contacts get appointed to. So there's, I don't know whether it's conscious or unconscious, but the commissions that they seem to be cutting are the ones that tend to serve the real citizens of San Francisco.
Well, it sounds in a way that they're trying to cut off public goods and public services.
In a way,
are they like? I'm curious to know: are they trying to move towards privatization of these things? I mean, like, as far as like, if you get rid of the commissions, they're actually going to be allocating those funds. Then where do those funds go, and who allocates them? Who decides where that library money goes? I mean, It doesn't sound arbitrary to me. It sounds very intentional as a way to cut off public goods and public services and privatize those things.
Well, without the commissions, the bureaucracy decides, and then ultimately, if you have a strong mayor, the strong mayor decides over the bureaucracy how those funds are going to be used. So, at best, it cuts off the public's ability to be able to control how the bureaucracy or affect how the bureaucracy operates.
Right.
And as we pointed out, without the commissions, the bureaucracies operate in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
So the directors of the library or public health and whatever, if they don't have commissions, they don't have hearings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get to them?
Right.
Well, they say, well, you have supervisors. But as Supervisor Peskin points out, under the charter, it is illegal for a supervisor to interfere with a department's workings. They can call for hearings and whatever, but they can't call up a department head and say, why aren't you sweeping that street in my district? However, a citizen can go before the Public Works Commission and ask that question, and the department head, will answer because the commissioners want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a move to consolidate power and to eliminate public participation.
Totally. And yeah, and on top of that too, a big commission that they want to take down is the police commission, which seems like the only, I mean, it's truly like the one thing that keeps the cops in line, especially in San Francisco, just like Oakland, has its issues. I remember when I first came here, we were still talking about Fajita Gate, which is something everyone should read about because it is so weird. But what is it? What is it with the San Francisco Police Department wanting no accountability? Like, it seems like so much. I mean, also too, Jeremy, I don't know how much how much the police unions are contributing to this stuff, and how involved they are. But what is this need to be rid of all accountability with the police here?
Well, the Prop D defenders would say they're not eliminating two aspects of the police overview of, well, I can't even say overview, responsibilities with regards to police conduct. One is to investigate complaints, and second, to hold hearings on officers that are disciplined. But the reality is, it removes their ability to control what the police rules are for conduct, which is contrary to the way the entire country is moving towards civilian oversight. So no longer can the police commission tell a police chief, what the guidelines are for use of force, the use of body cameras, the use of tasers. That's all been wiped out. And if you don't have public input to that, then the police chief can make whatever rules that they want to make. And I don't know why that's in there, except to make it popular because everyone's concerned about crime. So we should take all the shackles off of the police force.
And we know that doesn't work. That's how you get the writers, Just look at Oakland if you want to see how that becomes a huge disaster. So on top of that, you were talking about the removal of the commissioners. They're volunteer commissioners. And in the op-ed you had in the SF Examiner, you discuss how they'd basically be replaced by paid employees. I mean, do they really think it's going to be more efficient to replace volunteer commissioners with more middle managers?
Well, apparently. I mean, it was very disappointing that the controller statement in the ballot handbook only talked about the potential cost savings with 65 commission secretaries disappearing and not paying expenses for commissioners, which supposedly save a couple $1 million a year. The reality is, just take the Entertainment Commission. The Entertainment Commission was formed 4 or 5 years ago to hear permits on live music, after hours for bars, street fairs, etc. And that all used to be conducted by the police department. And people were upset because the police don't have a lot of interest in allowing permits, which might create more work for them. So it was moved to the Entertainment Commission. Well, if it goes moved back to the police department, they're going to have hearing officers. And whether they need to hire 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, those are all done by volunteer commissioners who would have those hearings. Same thing with the health department. On the health commission, they've got highly regarded experts to advise and to approve about $1 billion worth of spending. When they have that kind of review internally without a health commission, what are they going to have to do to hire the same kind of experts at $1 an hour? Similarly, the Health Commission also is the governing body for General and Laguna Honda. Well, if you eliminate the Health Commission, it no longer can be the governing body. Who's going to be the governing body? The Director of Department of Health can't be the governing body. Oh, well, we'll give it to the supervisors. I'm sure the supervisors would just love to be the governing body for General and Laguna Honda and have all those additional hearings. A lot of it just doesn't make any sense, and it will cost a lot of money and create a lot of chaos in the city over the next couple of years.
God, that's insane.
So, I like to ask a question about these. Jeremy said something about the interconnecting Grow SF, Together SF. Can you give us some names of the people? Because it does definitely sound like tech. It definitely sounds like they're trying to pretty much hire their own people. Biotech is interested in the Health Commission, for example. Places like Live Nation or are interested in the Entertainment Commission. So can you tell me some of the names of the people who are actually? We've already talked about Moritz, but for example, where does Gary Tan fit into this? Where does
and Mark Farrell? Why is there such a connection with Mark Farrell to Prop D?
Yeah, exactly.
The mayoral candidate, Mark Farrell.
Yeah, a lot of good questions here. I'll try to pick them apart. Okay, so we have 2 Phoenix papers that are out right now. We have a 3rd one coming out tomorrow. We're in the final edits for it. We have a event for it from 6 to 8 tomorrow evening at the Rorschach, which 34 7th Street. I can put an RSVP link into, or share an RSVP link, Kevin, for you to distribute. And we'd love to see y'all be able to make it there. I mention it because in Phoenix Papers Volume 2, we lay out what we call it the top 5 most important figures to know in this movement. And in the first paper, we laid out essentially 24 billionaires who are disproportionately right wing, who are behind the funding of these 3 organizations that are pushing the city rightward. Of course, 24 folks is a lot of names to keep track of. So he said, okay, let's narrow this down. Let's give you 5 primary targets to be paying attention to. So besides Michael Moritz, obviously is right there at top, you have folks like Gary Tan, who is both the director of Y Combinator, the world's most important startup incubator, also director of Grow SF and one of the largest donors for Grow SF. And even beyond, he's a centimillionaire. He's gone back and forth between being a millionaire and a billionaire. But beyond him as a donor, his network is incredibly important. So he pulls his Y Combinator people like Jessica Livingston, people like Emmett Shear, who you see those names popping up all over the place when you look into the donations. His Y Combinator partners collectively with him as well are a much larger funding source for a lot of these sort of more right-wing related issues. Specifically, these are all venture capitalist tech folks. So you have Gary Tan, you have Michael Moritz, Gary Tan, Grow SF, Michael Moritz, Together SF. You have William Obendorf. He's the co-founder and the president of the board of directors of Neighbors for a Better San Francisco. He also is a national charter school advocate. He's the co-founder and current director of an organization with Betsy DeVos, the former Department of Education head under Trump, of the American Federation for Children, which is a national charter school advocacy organization, the largest national charter school advocacy organization. And it's actually, and Doug mentioned this earlier with the Koch brothers, it's actually thanks to the labor folks and the folks who have been fighting for public schools and against the charter school movement that we have terms like astroturfing. That's where a lot of that language first came from, was, folks like Moms for Liberty, popping up in places like Lincoln, Nebraska, that were actually being funded by the Koch brothers. Okay. William Obendorf, director of Neighbors for Better San Francisco, Gary Tan, Michael Moritz. We have Chris Larson. Chris Larson is the founder of Ripple, which was a cryptocurrency company. He is not the director of any of these AstroTurf groups, though he is one of the largest donors to both Neighbors for Better San Francisco as well as Grow SF. And he's played, he has his cycles where he plays major roles. He's been a big supporter of London Breed over the last few years, supported her heftily, as well as he played a very major role in the DCCC race in March, supporting the Democrats for Change slate. He was by far the biggest donor in that race, which normally doesn't get too much attention, but he poured multiple millions of dollars into that race.
Which was something that is a volunteer thing, right? Like it's not paid, and basically what happened is basically all the people that won endorsed themselves. Like Trevor Chandler got into the DCC and then endorsed himself for supervisor.
Yep. No, exactly. I mean, like they in many ways, like the conservative slate, which is being backed by the AstroTurf network, by taking over the DCCC, they then were able to use the San Francisco Democratic Party, stamp of approval to then reify and add legitimacy to then those same AstroTurf candidates who then went on to run for supervisor. People like Marjan Philhauer, Trevor Chandler, Bilal Mahmood, people like Parag Gupta, who's running for a school board, and otherwise. So you have that going on. So Chris Larson, and then the fifth here that I'm thinking of is Gary.
Oh, and I wanted to say real quick with Chris Larson too. He's a big surveillance guy, right? That's a big part of what he's pushing for as well.
Yes, exactly. The fifth person is John Kilroy, and Kilroy is the director of Kilroy Realties. It's a large both developer and landlord across the state. He lives in Malibu. He is a major Trump donor, big time. I mean, both he and Obendorf are both major Republican donors. I mean, amongst the biggest Republican donors in the state of California, donating to Republican committees all across the country. Obendorf is particularly close with Mitch McConnell. He's donated multiple millions of dollars to Mitch McConnell's PAC, the Senate Leadership Fund, which then went ahead and funded J.D. Vance for his Senate race in 2022 in Ohio. But then Kilroy, has been a pretty major Trump donor, both this cycle and last cycle. And he's donated about $10 million, I believe, to the California Business Roundtable, which is the groups that, pushes for, more or less like conservative interests across the state, pro-business interests. Go back and think about like Prop 13 and the impacts of that. And that was California Business Roundtable that was helping push that forward. So those are the top 5 that we tell people to really like pay keen attention to. Though of course there are more than just that.
So what about this connection? Actually, first off, I want to say also thing to note about William Obendorf: hates public education, and honestly has said in interviews, I mean, the person he was talked to and was inspired to like kill public education was Milton Friedman. Basically, both of them have a boner for killing. Like, they just don't think regular people have the right to a good education. That is at the core of this charter school movement. I mean, seriously, like the working class does not deserve good education.
Well, but, it's like, they're very, like, we've learned from folks in Chicago how the charter school movement got planted there and became so huge under Rahm Emanuel. And, you even keep in mind, we've had Democratic past presidents who have also been very friendly with charter schools and the charter school movement, especially out of Chicago. But as we've seen, they like to, and you'll see it, and once you start understanding like this line of analysis, some things get pretty clear where you say, okay, so Neighbors for Better San Francisco, of their 11 board members, 5 of them are major charter school advocates. Beyond William Obendorf, you've got Stephen Merrill, you've got Louise Mulfield Patterson, Arthur Patterson, handful of others who are all also major donors within that world. And you see how then Neighbors for Better San Francisco, one of the things that they first, one of the most important campaigns that they worked on off the bat was the school board recalls and getting their school board people in. And now you see how, with the appointment of Matt Wayne, who came in, as we now know, to close public schools, as he did in Hayward before coming to San Francisco. All of a sudden you start seeing a trend of like, wait a second, you get people in there who then advocate for the closing of public schools because they say, oh, the budget, we can't deal with it, we got to close the schools. You close the schools in the areas that need the schools the most, low-income neighborhoods, neighborhoods that don't have many other educational opportunities, can't just send their kids to private school. And so then they manufacture the need. And so all of a sudden now it's like, oh, well, you have all these low-income families, let's say in the Mission or what have you, that have this need for a school. And now here are the charter school advocates to save the day, to bring the charter school to the people and get the people organized to advocate for it, to fill the gap that they themselves created. So that's part of the the insidiousness, I think, that we're seeing. And that's just one example with the charter schools, but it crosses into multiple other areas of
general Republican
San Francisco public interest.
General Republican playbook: create a problem and then say you're going to solve the problem that you created. That's the core of their entire movement. Exactly. I mean, so my question to both of you is like, okay, we keep talking about how we are obviously seeing these right-wing influences that are creeping into San Francisco politics, like what used to be considered a left-leaning city. How come most people are not aware that it actually is Republicans and conservatives who are trying to push the needle in San Francisco? And I mean, like not even the Chronicle really does any kind of real focus on, oh, these guys are Republicans and they're trying to pull in, like they're trying to turn San Francisco into a red city, and red cities die. Like, so
yeah.
So how is it that they're able to continue to push these measures and push these proposals without being exposed as anathema to what the city is supposed to represent? I mean, like that's something that I really I've tried to figure out. And I mean, you guys seem like you have the inside track on that.
Well, I think that basically, I mean, if you look at Michael Moritz, he's not contributing to Trump. He's supporting Kamala Harris. And San Francisco, when people ask about San Francisco is a city where there really are very few Republicans, but the divisions in the city are all within the Democrats. So most people don't really look at a Republican influence, because people who declare themselves as Republicans here have totally failed since what, the 50s to have any kind of power. But based on that, I mean, things that, for example, Jeremy and the Phoenix Project are doing is to expose the right-wing conservative movement that's not necessarily, it looks like Trump, but they don't say they're supporting Trump. They're hiding underneath, well, we're Democrats, but we don't like the way the city's run. And my God, anybody who's a progressive is wrong and needs to be thrown out of office. So it's kind of a disguise, Scott, that has to be exposed. That, okay, you say you're not a Republican, but you're taking all the tactics that Republicans have used nationally to try and take over the city. And that's the one opportunity that this election has, is to educate the public about, quote unquote, these moderates. They may call themselves moderates, but really basically they're using Republican tactics to try and take over the city. Even at the same time, they might be supporting the Democrats nationally.
Yeah. Yeah, and seriously, you literally have Republicans that have basically rehabbed their image to be Democrats. Joel Engardio, Trevor Chandler, a IPAC lobbyist, and who also campaigned for Romney. I mean, these guys are all, I believe, is Romney, yeah, during Obama, and like, seriously, these guys are all rehabbing their images to fit in because a Republican will never win in San Francisco. Yeah. Yeah. So now let's get into another Republican who's trying to rehab their image, Mark Farrell. There's this constant connection between Prop D and Mark Farrell's campaign, where it seems like it's actual funneling money to or there's like a funnel to both campaigns. They're tied into it. Yeah. How is that working out, and why is that happening?
I think it was happening because basically, and we're not privy to the discussions that Farrell had with Moritz and the head of the Together SF group, but by creating Together SF as a candidate affiliated committee, it allows them to skirt the $500 campaign contribution. And basically, if you really look at it clearly, Prop D is a slush fund for Mark Farrell's mayoral campaign. If you look at, I've got 15 flyers that look like this. Mark Farrell says, vote on Prop D, former interim mayor. And on the other side, it's the same thing. These are not paid for by the Mark Farrell for Mayor campaign. They're paid for by the Prop D campaign, which has got $7 million. So it's now, is it legal? There's some people who question that, because some of the original Prop D mailers that he had, and I've gotten 16 of them, 16 citywide mailers that cost, what, $150,000 a mailing. Only had Mark Farrell as an endorser. And the Ethics Commission will take this up, but it's certainly unethical. And if you combine that with his mishaps while he was supervisor, it's a real disappointment. It's a disappointment. When I got involved in 2014 to try and restrict Airbnb in San Francisco and make them follow the law, along with Gil Carlson and Calvin Welch, we spent a lot of time in Farrell's office trying to see if we could negotiate a compromise. At no point in that 3 or 4 years did he ever disclose that he had an interest in a competitor with Airbnb.
Oh,
At no point. And that is a huge, huge
ethic lapse.
That's an ethics lapse. But you know, for somebody who's trying to lobby for the good of the city, not to have, you know, to have discussions and not be told that, it's just it's reflective on the man. Most ethical people wouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, he's hitched his campaign to like they've hitched those two campaigns together. So Prop D and Mark Farrell have hitched their campaigns to each other, and they're both Together SF initiatives. So Mark Farrell is the Together SF candidate, Prop D is the Together SF initiative, and we see that laid out in their internal document. They're like, we're going to be running people for mayor, running people for supervisor, and passing referendums, all for the purpose of consolidating power and pushing a pro-business and pro-real estate agenda. You know, that's what we're doing here. And they're very straightforward about it. And they say, okay, and if you want to be on our side, you know, get on board. And so you see these kind of I'm looking at the donations for Prop D, Mark Farrell's Yes on D, from the last 2 weeks. And like I've mentioned these names already today, you have, you have Tom Chavez, who's on the board of Neighbors for Better San Francisco, donating $25,000. William Obendorf, $45,000. Louise Moldfield Patterson and Arthur Patterson, there's two other board members. She donated $101,000. He donated $100,000. Michael Moritz, $500,000. There's another Obendorf for $150,000. So that makes it about $200,000. This is just in the last 2 weeks. And then just on the 28th, we had another $100,000 from Moritz come in. This is just for the Mark Farrell Prop D. So, and they already have their own committee that's separate than this, which is the Fix San Francisco Committee, Fix San Francisco Government Committee. And that is the committee that is a joint committee being funded by Together SF and Neighbors for Better San Francisco that's pushing forward Prop D specifically. So this is distinct from that committee, which also has millions of dollars in it. So it's like, they're like, how much do we need to pay in order to get this thing to pass? And we're going to throw that in to get this over the edge.
You know, what's funny to me is the parallels between Prop D and Project 2025. Like that is the strangest thing, because that's exactly what the plan is to, well, they already got the president immunity, right? Like that with the Supreme Court, right? Then get rid of all of the FDA, the EPA, like get rid of all the so-called commissions, throw out all the people who are disloyal to the program, and then actually buy a mayor or buy a president and put him in that position. I mean, it seems like the parallels are just ridiculous. It's almost as if they all got together and like, okay, we're going to do this nationally, we're going to do this statewide, we're going to do it locally, we do it in the school boards. Like, I mean, like, do you think that there is some kind of like organizing force, because there is such great parallel, but like, you know, about driving and consolidating all the power to the authoritative leader of the position? Like, do you think that there's some kind of, do you think they communicate with each other about this?
Yes and no. So I'll say in the fact that, like, okay, so like Doug mentioned, Michael Moritz is very pro Kamala. You know, he's put a lot of money behind Harris. He's very anti-Trump. However, his other partners at Sequoia Capital, or former partners at Sequoia Capital, are big Trump supporters, big venture capitalist Trump backers. In the same realm, VC Silicon Valley realm, as people like Elon Musk, also a big Trump supporter, people like Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz also have been big Trump supporters. I think Horowitz turned around and then gave money to Kamala, but still had ideologically is very in favor of what Trump has been pushing forward. And they're in the same network, and this is shout out to Gil Duran's reporting with the New Republic, but this is in, they're in the same network as Balaji Srinivasan, who's the proponent of the network state.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the same network as Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel. Curtis Yarvin is he's like a self-titled monarchist. Like, he doesn't believe that democracy works at all. Peter Thiel, kind of in the same boat, as both mentor. Peter Thiel was a mentor not just to J.D. Vance, is now VP on the ticket, but he also was a mentor to Gary Tan. He also was a mentor to Mike Solana from Pirate Wires. So through Palantir. So there's a lot. I mean, and irregardless, you have those people who are disproportionately now right wing, and you also notice how, Trump raised as much money when he came to San Francisco as Kamala did for their last big fundraiser. David Sachs helping host that. Yeah. So you've got these players that are very much not just like ideologically in the same room together and hanging out and kind of rubbing shoulders, but they also have a long history of co-investing in each other's companies, doing startups together. They're all in this venture capitalist tech class, and they've been in it for long enough that they're friends. So I think that like the amount of interconnection between them cannot be discounted. Given what we do know, just at least about the Trump circle, but then also the interrelations between the Trump people and people that we think as being more liberal, people like Reid Hoffman, who's still part of the PayPal mafia, and people like Moritz, who, lo and behold, they're both also two of the biggest investors in California Forever that we saw happening in Solano County. And that's within the framework of the network state, which is the Balaji thing that Gary Tan's a huge advocate for and goes and speaks at that conference every year. Mm-hmm. So you've got there's a lot more interconnection here than I think a lot of folks at first blush might give credit towards.
Yeah, and we've definitely talked about California Forever. The basically it's a company town with a new coat of paint, it's like, which is still a failed business model. I don't know why they keep trying to, this time it's going to work. I promise. No, it's all going to end up like Pullman. But now here's a question. Now, Prop E, I've seen, is supposed to be kind of the counter, or at least like kind of like a better Prop D, maybe having some kind of streamlining of is actually Prop E a good thing, and especially in terms of when compared to Prop D?
Is that Peskin's baby too? That's another question I wanted to ask. Is that actually Peskin's baby as an answer to Prop D?
Yes, that's Peskin's baby.
Yeah, and does that deserve our listeners' support?
Well, I think that, look, we had, forget about the Rose report, which Prop D was supposedly based upon, which actually doesn't support Prop D, but they said there was a subsequent analysis that they haven't made public that did. But both the civil grand jury and Spur, Spur's somewhat questionable. I mean, they generally tend to be more conservative when it comes to looking at city government. But anyway, the civil grand jury, both of them reported that the commission structure needs to be analyzed. And the civil grand jury came out in the spring. Spur came out a couple of months later. And what Prop E tries to do is to follow up on that recommendation, create a task force, have public hearings, and put things on the ballot that need to be put on the ballot to either change the commission structure or try and make the commissions more effective. And the reality is, yes, we really haven't looked at the charter in almost 30 years. I mean, the last major charter reform was 1996. And so if you look at it objectively, yes, it does deserve a look at, and to try and see if we can make the commission system more efficient and more effective. Now, is Prop E perfect? I mean, I wouldn't say Prop E is perfect in every regard, but it would achieve the goal of taking a look at the commissions, do the kind of cost-benefit analysis that should have been done by not only looking at how much money you save by eliminating commission, but how much more money does the bureaucracy need to do what the commissions are doing. And so, you know, I think you'd want to vote yes on E and no on D.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that really quick. I think that like oftentimes with these kind of initiatives, these kind of more like right-wing push initiatives, they do this like two truths and a lie. You know, they're like, okay, so there's a lot of commissions that we could probably like figure out how to consolidate. You know, there's a little bit of like government excess or fat that we can figure out that's like, you know, too much that we should reorganize. And it's like, yep, like that's true. And they can be like, well, and we're spending, you know, and it's hard to sometimes get things passed because you've got the, you know, the department heads that are being appointed by the commissions, and there's less accountability towards the mayor, and you know, and it makes it hard to get things done. You can say, okay, like maybe there's some merit to that, but then the lie that they then push is like, and so therefore, to fix this, we are going to slash them in half and radically, and for the ones that remain, and this is an important part as well, for the ones that remain, we're going to give the mayor much more appointing power than the Board of Supervisors to appoint who is on the commissions that are still there. And if you want to make any new commissions after this point, those are almost all appointed by the mayor, and all of the department heads are appointed by the mayor. So,
and the other thing, Jeremy, is that the commissions taken out of the charter by Prop D, and any of the existing commissions can only be advisory.
Exactly.
They have no power.
They take, yep. They pull the teeth out.
And so the only commissions that have any power are the ones that are remaining in the charter.
Right. And when you look at it that way, you're like, okay, this is therefore like, you know, it's separating out what I think of as being like the culture war versus the true agenda. And it's like the culture war that I see them pushing, the front is that, you know, government fat is bad, you know, cut the fat, cut the bureaucracy. And people are like, yeah, I cut the bureaucracy. And they're like, okay, cool. We're going to use that. You're going to use that energy of cutting the bureaucracy to then push forward a radical consolidation of power initiative.
Right.
There's a reason why they're not calling the initiative, you know, if the initiative was being advertised as like, do you want to give the mayor more power? People would probably be like, oh, like,
no,
not really. Like,
look at the school board. Look what happened there.
Right. They're like, that's not a very popular initiative. But if it's like, oh, cut the fat, you cut the government bureaucracy, you cut the red tape, people are like, yeah, you know, too much bureaucracy, too much fat.
If you see the TV ads that they're running, they're absolutely disgusting. I don't know whether any of you have seen the TV ads, but they're showing 12 white men in blue suits and red ties sitting on a commission, falling asleep, picking their teeth, and portraying that as to what commissioners really do in San Francisco. And it goes to, and then, you know, why should we be paying money to support these commissions? I mean, again, I've opposed a lot of big money in my 50 years. I've never seen it stoop down to this level of misinformation, lies, distortions, and really attacks on the citizenry and the good people who service San Francisco. I mean, it really is disgusting.
I can agree.
Yeah, I agree, and definitely like, and I think in a similar way, when I look at like Prop E, for example, that passed in March, like with the with like giving more police power, you know, giving more power to the police and less power to the police commission. You know, once again, like that wasn't advertised as like, should the police have more power? It was advertised, you know, the culture war point that they advertised was around police chases. It's like police officers aren't able to do their job. You know, you've got people committing crimes and they can't chase them down. Don't you want police officers to do their jobs well? That's how they sell it. That sells well. And then, but that's the culture war point. But then what it's actually doing is giving more power to the police and they're taking away power from the commission. Yeah. So I think a big part of my job with the Phoenix Project and like part of our analysis is trying to cut through those divides. Right. Like, okay, like what is just the culture war? Are they just using to sell to people? Because they pulled it and they've, focus group tested it and they know that this is a good talking point, that this sells well, versus what's their true agenda that we can bring to light to make people aware that, like, no, you're being sold a lie here.
A point that you should follow up on, Jeremy, is that there was another initiative that was actually proposed that was actually giving the mayor more power directly by allowing the mayor to appoint deputy mayors, et cetera. And I think they realized they had a better way to deal with it, which is deal with the commissions, attack the commissions to give the mayor more power rather than giving the mayor more power directly.
Wow.
But one other point I wanted to make I picked this up and I haven't heard any argument against it. The initiative bans the payment of any compensation to any commissioner, including expense reimbursements. Now, it doesn't say no expense reimbursements, but it says any compensation. And the reality is that people who don't have, it really discourages people who do not have the income to be able to go to City Hall, no bus fare, no parking reimbursements and whatever. I mean, it really is total. And some of the commissions do allow health benefits for people who would qualify under the San Francisco Health Program. It's really very discriminatory against commissioners who don't have the means to be able to serve on commissions, and blatantly discriminatory. Only wealthy people should be sitting on commissions, not poor people.
Yes, which is a huge issue too, because that's what you're going to get. Only the wealthy people could be able to do it, and they have a certain viewpoint that they want. This is something that was fought when Vincent Hallinan took on the jury system back in the 30s. I mean, that was the issue. They were fine with civil trials, was the fact that the jury system was picking only rich wives, and actually people related to like the San Francisco train system, which was actually being sued a lot because a lot of people were getting hurt by it. But that's a whole other history. But that's always the constant battle, is trying to get as many rich people as you can into power, because they usually have a certain viewpoint. Well, this has been great. We've been going for an hour. This is really awesome. I do want to ask, though, how are you guys feeling about its chances of passing? Prop D, I should say.
Well, I'm somewhat hopeful. Basically because of Mark Farrell. Almost every piece of literature that is yes on D is associated with Mark Farrell. And most people don't, Prop D is 72 pages long. Most people will not get into the detail. And yes, we had a 110-page ballot handbook where we had some great arguments, but people aren't going to read that. But particularly in the progressive areas of the city where people might have thought that, or maybe we should cut some commissions, having Mark Farrell associated with Prop D is going to make them vote no. So if we get a pretty good turnout in, the progressive areas of the city, and then hopefully the fact that Breed went against it, and the limited amount of PR that we've been able to get, it's going to be really close. And if on election night it still can't be called, I'll be very, very hopeful. But, hope springs eternal. I don't know what you think, Jeremy.
I don't think I have too much to add, honestly, to your analysis there. I think I'm right on the same page. And and same thoughts on it. I will say that, like, you know, Gary Tan, going back to him for a second, he hosted this big party, you know, this last winter, end of 2023. He brings together all of the important players in the AstroTurf network. He brings together all of the candidates that they helped get elected. You know, Dorsey, Engardio, got Stephanie there. They have as their very special secret guest is Brooke Jenkins. And so, and at that party, and that's actually, you know, Josh Cohen and the Standard did a pretty good job covering it. Of course, they're the only ones that were able to be there. But they showed how, you know, I think Todd David, who's the director now of Abundance Network, but former director of Housing Action Coalition, Scott Wiener, Connected Person, etc.
Notable Twitter troll as well.
Todd Davis.
Oh, excuse me, Ron.
No. But there's a lot of confusion between the two. But they are not actually the same person, though. I have issues with both of them. But Todd David has a quote in that article. He says, I've never seen the moderate camp so aligned in all of my years, 17 years. I've never seen them all so aligned, all on the same page. And they do give an inkling. They say, well, the one thing that we don't all agree on is the mayor. But besides that, we're all on the same page. And we've seen how in this last year, they had all their ducks lined up. They really believed in, and a lot of us believed that, for Mark Farrell, who was the Together SF candidate, and also I didn't mention before, but his wife, Liz Farrell, was on the board of Together SF for many years. And just to put that plug in there as well, she also wrote for the Marina Times. Actually, I think she still does write for the Marina Times, so put that in there as well. That's a whole other conversation about Susan Dye Reynolds, Gotham by the Bay, but Doomloop stuff. But regardless, they really had their ducks lined up. And for a lot of us, we were like, okay, this is Mark Farrell's race to lose in a lot of ways. Like, he had so much momentum coming into this election. And I think now where we are with the AstroTurf network and the moderate camp, quote unquote moderate, I would call it conservative Democrat camp, is fractured in the way that they are right at this moment. If Mark Farrell loses, which it looks like he's not going to win, if Prop D loses, which I also think it's not going to win, and if a majority of the Together SF-backed candidates that are running for supervisor and down the ballot do not win their seats, to me, that's like the Death Star blowing up.
Yes.
Like, truly. Like, it's not the end of the empire. The empire's here. It's healthy. They're strong. But from 2022 till this November, they've been lining up and blowing up planets. And like us here on the progressive side, we're like, wow, like, this is terrifying. They're really created this juggernaut that's just not whacking down, sweeping elections, uncontested. And for me, it's like, yeah, like if we can hand them a big decisive blow, which I think is coming, it's not going to be like we won everything, but it's going to be, they're going to be very knocked down from what they were expecting to win. And I see that as a rallying cry for the resurgence of the progressive movement, moving beyond this November. We just got to keep it going for the next, the next two movies after this. But.
Yeah.
we have to organize, because the progressive movement has been fractured for several years now.
Yep.
And we need to come together after the first of the year, and no matter what happens in this election, and be better organized and do better planning than up to now. Because most, quite honestly, look, I'm in my 70s. I've been active for 50 years. There's a new generation needs to come in on the progressive side and start to coalesce and become a movement like we were, 30, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
It's a new iteration of it. It's like it's the neighborhoods versus downtown.
Yeah.
New characters, but same logic, same lines,
right.
money.
Right.
And I was talking to Bill Issel, the historian, San Francisco historian, who wrote a lot about the 32 Charter Amendment going way back, which was the last sort of large conservative charter amendment that was similar to Prop D on the ballot this year. Consolidated power at the top, pushed by wealthy white business interests. And he also fought on the 76 fight. And he was sharing me some clippings of, I felt like the stuff that he was writing as like a letter to the editor back in, 75 could have been written today.
Right.
So it's all circular, of course. And well, it's just another up and down way cycle,
In some ways,
That's
yeah.
great.
Some ways, yes. Some ways new. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. And it's also kind of funny to think of like our school board was Alderaan in this metaphor, the Star Wars metaphor.
Right.
But anyways, this has been a great episode. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. This was so informative.
Yep.
Hopefully, everyone, if you haven't voted yet, especially you San Francisco voters, vote no on Prop D, please. It's so urgent that you stop this takeover. Listen to these people. They know what they're talking about. They've done tons of research, and you should listen to them. And that's it for this episode of the Doomloop Dispatch. We are on all the socials. We're on the X. We're on the Instagram. We are on Patreon. Please support us on Patreon. We are actually switching to a delay model. So if you sign up and subscribe with us on Patreon, you will get these episodes before they are released everywhere else. So do yourself a favor and help us pay our StreamYard bills.
Yes, please.
Yeah, please. It's a lot. We do a lot of work for this. Totally. And from Scott and I'd like to say, keep fighting the good fight.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for having us here.
Yeah, anytime,
Take care.
guys. Bye.
Yeah, pleasure being
Bye.
here.